I have this interface that I just threw together. I've been using Vim, and the reason that I've been using Vim specifically for this is so I don't get too complex. There are some limitations with Vim. I shouldn't necessarily say limitations. Using an IDE or some sort of other code editor like VS Code can make some things easier, like searching across the entire code base and replacing certain strings, getting the kind of syntax highlighting and code completion for the specific language features that I might be using as I develop this. But I haven't been doing that here because I want to make sure that I keep generally the structure of this relatively simple. So with this simulation, I have the ability to generate new nodes and save their positions. So I refresh the page and they are where they were. I have the ability to use different parameters from the query string to, for example, add different abilities as I interact with this simulation. So this one makes them grow. And there's another one, I think that I need to, that one doesn't work. Or it doesn't stay the same unless I save it, I should say. Save that, refresh the page. So I have grow, shrink, and change color. And they all do different things. And this is meant to work with this parser that I also wrote. You can step through. And this is cool. I find it interesting. I'm going to copy all of the identities from this file and the tokens that they represent, and just plug that into this D3 page. And something that I want to point out is that this interface works because I know where everything is. If I didn't know where everything was and what each, I guess the quirks of each feature, then it would be a lot more difficult for me to navigate what this is. But the point of this is to make it a little bit easier for me to visualize the kinds of things that are related to other things. So here we have containers, hat, 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 hat. And all of these containers are related to the word hat, the nominal token. And there are a few different phrases that have the same content. And so with this, it's pretty easy for me to see how these are related. And I really appreciate that, being able to visualize these relationships. Anyways, the thing that I would like to do now is address some of the design flaws. Do I have charge represented here? I don't think so. But yeah, so looking at this from a design perspective, I can talk through the stuff that I like about it and the stuff that I don't like so much. One of the things that I like about it is that it's easy for me to interact with these different elements. I didn't make the CSS behind this too complex. So what I'm doing here is essentially I'm looking for a container that has this HTML that's followed by an input that is checked. And I've done that a couple times. There are 3 different form-ish elements that have this. But I've noticed that as I'm adjusting the simulation parameters, because of the way that I have this structured, it's not actually very convenient for me to work with. I've mostly been using the query parameters that you can see change up here. So if I were to modify this interface, I think that I would have this modify page parameters form where I have the modify simulation parameters form. And then I would just get rid of this entirely. The things that I would need to change are already represented either in what I am aware of. So I just know that I should change the URL if I want to access certain parameters, or I have this form that has some of the less obvious ones. So I would want to get rid of this modify simulation parameters. I also don't know if I like that I need to consistently check this add depth display, which shows me this text area that has confusing instructions. So for example, if I change the link strength to 0.2 and click go, and you can see that the link strength is changed in the simulation, but if I refresh the page, that change isn't reflected because the URL didn't change. But if I do the same thing and then hold the shift key while I'm clicking the button, then the link strength changes because the URL changes. So this is something that I can use, but I don't really use it because if I'm making a change like that, I usually just want to see it reflected as I refresh the page. It's just a little bit easier for me to keep track of it that way. So I'm not entirely convinced that this is the way to go. Also, in terms of modifying simulation data, I realized that I actually use that feature a lot more than I thought that I would. And that's just because, let's say I want to change all of these to another person, another cat, another dog, another mouse. And I also want to put those in locational containers. To identify that at this specific topic, we have these specific attributes, and parse that, play it to make sure that I get the identities, and copy that, and then go over to that simulation, modify simulation data, paste that in, change the data selector because this is just an array, click add, and save that, refresh the page. Then I have all these new relationships. So this is something that I would want to do relatively often, just because it makes it easier for me to interact with the simulation by adding new nodes. Also being able to filter them, which isn't functionality that I have. I appreciate that when I serialize the nodes input, then I have specifically as I appreciate the concept behind this, but it's not actually very practical because this is always going to be an array of nodes. It's never really going to be anything other than that, just with the way that I interact with it. So needing to change the data selector so often for something that I do so regularly isn't actually very good. What else? I don't know entirely all the stuff. I also don't use the simulation buttons, although I understand that I might want to at some point. It can be useful, I just haven't really found a reason to use them. So maybe making this less prominent and putting this under one of these forms, these form fields, be the way to go. But in general, I'm pretty thankful for the way that this works out. It's helpful for me to visualize the stuff that's on my mind, and I like that a lot. So what do I want to change about this? I want fewer unwritten rules. I want to make sure that the functionality of this is documented I want to make sure that the keyboard navigation is within the realm of what I would want to do to interact with this. What else? I think those are the main things. I also want to make sure, because I don't know, I think that I might have form input. No? What is this? Name form input. Yeah, I don't have that quite. I think that I might want to be able to save the contents of this parser based on the URL, because I do find that having the URL navigation for these concepts is pretty helpful. I just like the way that works. Cool. So something that I'm kind of curious about is uploading this to YouTube and copying down all of the transcript and pasting it into something like ChatGPT, and then asking that to format the list of objectives as tickets. And I could go through the process of saying, hey, if I were on an agile team and we use some sort of ticketing methodology, then this is how we would interact with it. Also, something that I want to clarify about this is that I also have pictures. How do I do this? Some of the text here has pictures that are associated with it. So if I paste this here, replace, save, refresh. And because of the MD5 of this phrase, you can see an image. For some reason, it doesn't always show up. I need to figure that out, make that a bit more consistent.